Hey guys, this is Kirop speaking, and in today's Little Dev Update we are going to talk about mainly two things, and that is the test track editor as well as the test track simulations. Before I get into it, let's make a few things clear, and that thumbnail was already hinting at it. Not everything that I'm going to talk about in this video is going to come with this next big update. Especially the racetrack simulation is considered to be in its infancy, and a base version will be in this upcoming release, but most of it is going to be finessed in over the course of the next year and then be hopefully fully complete with the Terso update, which is the final update in the Supercharger update suite of updates, which were the Ellisbury update, the Rilma update, which is coming next, and then the Terso update. The track editor itself will be standalone and will be part of the Rilma update, so a closer look at that is certainly warranted. Also, that one will have features in it already present that won't be utilized until the Terso update though. And yet another disclaimer to make is that not all of those features might make it into the game at all, because that is still so early on that we can't be sure that we can promise them, but we are certainly going to try our best to make it happen. So before we get into it, when is the Rilma update going to be released to you? Well, we are still aiming for the end of this year, 2024. And that is going to be the open beta opt-in version of the release. Alright, everything clear? Okay, let's get into it. And there we are on the test track. We have a car that drives around it. And that has never been very advanced at all. More or less, it is a steady state simulation of what is going on. There's nothing really dynamic about it. It is only ever featuring a single lap of the track from a standing start. There is no racing, there's nothing else to it. It's just a car driving, hopefully optimally, around the track. And you can't influence anything about it. With the Ellisbury update, we did release a new series of tracks, all in the Ellisbury Tri-Oval. And for later context, let me just play the car out on this one here. This is the Ellisbury Junior course that you already have access to. With these track simulations being as simple as they are, there is not really that much to them. It's a nice flavor thing to be added to the game, but there's not much gameplay to be had with it. And our aim with this here, these changes that I'm going to talk about today, is that we're going to change that. In order for us to delve deeper into this, we need to understand how these track simulation calculations are currently working. The original track simulation was created by Martin. You will know him as Der Bayer. He has an excellent YouTube channel as well, which I'm going to link down in the description below. And he, after all these years, is working with us again on improving the track simulations. But how did they work in the first place? Well, here he has prepared for us a little slide that explains the fundamentals. Basically, every car has an acceleration profile, a braking profile, and a maximum cornering speed. The cornering speed depends on the corner radius, as well as downforce and all those calculations that are going on before you even enter the track. If we combine those three aspects, like we have a corner which we can take at a certain speed, then we go backwards with the braking profile, and from the exit of the previous corner, we go forwards with the acceleration profile. Basically what we end up with is a complete speed profile across the track. This is not entirely how it works at the moment, because there's a bit more of a fudge factor so that the car goes into the corner a little quicker and comes out a little quicker as well, while in the middle has the slightly lower speed then. So it's a slightly better than constant corner radius profile. And that brings us to how the tracks are built in current automation. Everything you see on the track in current automation are constant radius corners. Those are driven by the car along a fixed line. So if we have corners that are tightening or opening up, then those would be 2 or a maximum of 3 corner radii combined together so that they make for a rough approximation of that corner. But it always will be remaining a rough approximation. And especially on larger tracks, you will see some very awkward behavior of the car. For instance, if you are racing on the GT circuit or Grand Prix circuit, you will, on Ellisbury, the massive map. These are 8,192 pixels wide and high. And basically you have to edit them in the existing editor, or do guesswork, on the scale of like, 1280 times 720. That is not easy to do, and thus we have massive discrepancies on these new maps. That is all going to change though. This track, the Ellisbury Tri-Oval, was made with the new system in mind. So let's briefly talk about that new system. Fundamentally, it is the freeing up of the car from its ideal line spline, where it strictly followed every inch of it, to the car being driven by an AI on the road surface. And with AI, I mostly mean controllers and state machine and stuff. Nothing advanced, but in the end, it will probably be quite complex nonetheless. What Martin is doing here for us is creating a completely from scratch written new simulation of what is going on, but completely unbound. Instead of having just an ideal line spline, which is strictly followed, we have an ideal line spline that acts as a suggestion, an optimal line to follow for the car in question. And then we have a track spline that has a certain width, basically the track surface. And the AI will try to stay on top of it as best it can. And here we go. The car is looking ahead and dynamically trying to figure out where the slowest points in the corners are and make calculations from there. The basic principle is more or less the same as before, but it is much more accurate as it is actually calculating backwards from the apex of the corner, the slowest point in the corner rather, and then going backwards to see how early it needs to brake. It's considering the grip during braking and everything, like the steering, grip required, longitudinal versus lateral, and all that good stuff. So you get dynamic speeds that make sense, unlike before. In this little simulation, you already see that there is a little green dot there that is the target for the steering of it, and the car is actually free to move about on the track. It is not apparent here because the controller can handle it pretty well. Yeah, we're crossing finish line, still some optimization work to do there, but we can have multi-lap, for instance, with this quite easily. So this car is driving on the track completely free. It doesn't know about its size just yet, so it's not trying to avoid going off the track with its wheels, but that is something that is, of course, also going to be added. And of course, what we're driving on here is the Ellisbury Junior track, as I've shown you before, but made in our new track editor. Welcome to the Track Editor, a standalone tool that allows you to make test tracks and race tracks, and whatever you like, really. It does feature the bestest version of our logo, which is a perfect representation of what you're going to build, I guess. The current state of this tool that you're looking at is, I would say, late alpha stage. So getting pretty close to being feature complete for the first set of features that we have planned. Those features include stuff that won't be used in Rilma at all. But you will be able to see some potential here. And that potential is something that we will need to talk about at the end of the video, I would suggest. So, how about we make a new track? How about we make a new track that is the one track that you will get, that is almost done already, with the Rilma update. It is a new track complex even. Let's go in here and create that new track. Let's call it the Narnilla Little Dev Update, and of course I'm the Assassinate Bob. That is my handle. I'm going to rebrand to Assassinate Bob, I guess. Alright, so you can add a description for the track, and then let's go forward. And what we are going to do here is to select the main sprite that we're going to use. As you can see here, we are expecting a full 8K times 8K resolution picture. And in case you wonder how much work that is to make one, it is quite intensive. So here we have the current work in progress version of the Narnilla track, which George is working on. He was the winner of our track art competition, and my god, is it beautiful and detailed already. So, and this is, you will see some issues around the place. It's still in the polishing phase, so there's still more stuff to be done. But in general, it is already pretty cool. The thing is, as you see here, we are not really that zoomed in. It's an 8K texture, and let's see, can we, 100% on a 1080p would be something like this. So once you've chosen your majestic background, you continue on and need to decide how you want to be placing it, and if you've done the job right, then you don't need to do anything here, because that is already 8K times 8K. But you could, for instance, just pull data off of Google Maps, paste it together in Photoshop or Paint or whatever you want to use, and or GIMP it or something, and then put it in here, and then you can manually crop in here as long as you know the resolution, and it will tell you if this is suitable or not. But now let's just continue on here, and we do have some settings that you complete, like what the scale is of the map. This map specifically has a 4 pixels per meter of map scale. That means that you can set it so that the track width is correct and everything else as well. Like all scales are then correct. Camber setting can determine how much of a range of camber you will have on the track that you want to use, and then the same goes for elevation, and let's set that up accordingly there. Always on the right hand side you have some descriptions that will be useful, including some of the hotkeys, and in general we do want to add a full tutorial to this as well that has help screens for every one of these tabs. Familiar layout though, as you have seen from, if you have played Automation, you will find yourself at home here more or less. Alright, we are indeed in the Automation universe. You can set custom, that would be the real world for instance, or on the moon or wherever, right? But in this case we do have Frenia, and the city is called Narnilla. Something that will not be in this very first version is, likely at least, is going to be the weather simulation that is attached to it all. The weather simulation is done, but how it will affect the cars might not be done just yet. So what we have here is a weather profile that you can set up, wind strengths or rather directions. So these are probabilities for the wind directions being generated. Can change how quickly the weather changes and all that good stuff. The temperature range with the mean that you expect there, and you can have all that. And the goal is that all these parameters, like what the actual temperatures are and stuff, are going to affect the car's performance on the track, including, of course, rain. And that rain is going to be localized. So I've written the weather simulation for this. Let's try to generate something. Oh yeah, this is probably a good example. This is one random scenario that we are seeing here out of infinity. It's completely randomized every time, but it is based on these probabilities that you have set. So what I can do now is just speed forward, and you will see that we are deteriorating in weather. It's becoming more and more cloudy as we move in there, and it spawns more and more clouds. Each cloud is individual, and very soon you will see a bit of a descent into this deep valley, and we should be seeing some rain. The cloud sizes are currently deliberately a little small so that we can easily see if that is working. See more overcasts happening, and we should see some rain coming there. There we have some rain coming towards the track. And, oh, that's a whole front coming towards over the track, and it is going to be very wet very soon. But as you see, that takes some time for that to happen, and the rain will accumulate on the track. Each little sector here, which we're going to talk about in a bit, will have its own unique measure of how much rain is on there, which depends on how much passed over it and how many cars have driven across it. So, and how much sun has been doing the drying. All that is going to be simulated, and that simulation is written already, but it will take a while to hook that in. Oh, the same, by the way, goes for wind strength. Air resistance will depend on the wind direction, and yeah, that means that you might be a little slower or faster on a straight than usual. Now that we have set up the global parameters for the track that we are making, we're going to set up the various track layouts. I'm just going to do one here. I'm going to do my favorite, the old track. It is from the 1920s, and it is using a very old part of the track along with some of the newer ones, but let me show you its features. First though, you do get the opportunity to select your variation sprites. You can craft sprites that are full sunny and full overcast, so that when the weather simulation comes along and casts a shadow on your track, that there's blending between the shadow version and the sunny version. Once that is working, that will look pretty awesome. Unfortunately, the blend mode is currently broken, so I can't show you in more detail, but you see the shading is all different, the look is different, and once you have dynamic movement of clouds across this looks actually pretty awesome. I do have some mockups in Photoshop, but currently not in this version. With the rubber build-up on the road, though, if you have placed that correctly, then we should be able to see that once we blend in some more rubber, you see that, well, even though this is a subtle change, this layer needs to be made a little darker. You see that we have rubber built up on the track as well. If you don't have the means of making your own overcast version with different shadows and everything, that's probably a little too advanced for most people, you can also just use an overcast shader that you can select a custom color for. Anyway, let's continue on. Now, we are making the track itself. We're going to start out with making the race ideal line, and then we make the track surface definition afterwards. So let me show you how that roughly works. It is pretty simple. It's fully spline based, so if you have dealt with splines before, then all the better. But I'm going to do it reasonably quick here. This is not supposed to be a tutorial on how to use them properly, but already you see that this is probably not how you would be doing it first time around. I know why I'm leaving such big gaps. This seems wrong at first, but it is the correct way of doing it, because you want to use the features of the splines to do the smoothing for you. So this is the old track through the forest. It is a little challenging. It has some unique features. 18% slope in this section of the track, and another one a little further up here with like 16-17%. It is climbing between here-ish and the top here of about 80 meters vertically. So in freedom units, that is just shy of 90 yards. So I'm going to speed this process up a little for you. Once I have the very rough node placement done, I can start to actually edit the nodes. This is working very much like any kind of busy spline editing that you have seen in other programs, but it is very nice and smooth. You do have these handles that determine the strength of the node there, how it is affecting it. I can hold down the shift key to keep the angle locked and just extend the handle or not. So now I'm going to align everything with the straight that comes before and after, and then I'll get back to you. Alright, now we have determined all the correct base directions, and one more thing that I want to point out here is that the ideal line width can be set to be whatever your kind of racing is expected to be on this one. If you're dealing with go-karts, then you probably want to go a little smaller. But yes, you can make it fatter or smaller depending on what you want to have racing on here. But in general, of course, you're going to aim for slightly more than 2 meters, I would guess. And then what we see here is that this width is actually 2 meters wide, if you have set the scale correctly, that is. Now what I'm going to do is to make these corners with just using the handles, holding down shift so that I don't change the already correct angle. And you see here that, yeah, that's actually going to be pretty smooth, isn't it? Something like this, for instance. Now, also very helpful is switching on this mode, which shows you the corner severity, or like how much it bends. The same info you have down here is super useful. You can see the actual corner radius. And very important is that we are going to do between each node, this might still change, but I think it's probably fair to assume that it's not necessary to change. Between each main node, we have 24 subsectors. And each one of them, you see here, this is one, this is another one, there's another one, there's another one, right? You can see with this color grading, you can clearly see them, and also they're kind of polygons along the way, so looks a little chunky. But what was in automation currently in the track sim is that there's one constant radius corner. And here we have 24 constant radius corners that are progressively becoming tighter or wider depending on how you lay out the corner itself. Also, here it tells you what your corner radius minimum is, and you might want to play around so that you do see how you can affect that, and you in general want to keep the corners as wide as possible to make them as efficient as possible. So maybe we want to be a little further out here. You see, if we start the corner a little further out, we can get it even a little smoother, almost at 35 meters, but we are now a little tight. Yeah, there, this is still looking good. I'm not going to make this perfect, by no means. I've made that way too often already, in testing that is. But this only serves the purpose of showing you how it generally works. This is a situation where you see that splines are super useful. Having a smooth curve through here, without even having something in the middle there to define the midpoint for the corners. We're doing 2 corners with just 2 of these main nodes. Quite handy, that. Alright, and there we have the ideal line, more or less done. Of course, you can do as much tweaking as you like. But now we have a full lap completed, start-finish line there. And now we need to go into a different mode. The next tab is all about making the track surface spline. It automatically clones the spline for you, the ideal line spline, and basically what you're going to do is... these are now completely separate from the ideal line, by the way. And you can set a desired width, clone that to all the other nodes, so that you don't have to do double and triple and 40 times the work. And then you can adjust the spline the way you see fit. The only thing that you need to make sure of is that the ideal line is actually within the surface. So once you have a nice definition of the surface of the track, and we currently do not, because this is not a valid one. Let me make it valid real quick, even though it's ugly. There we go. Once you have done all that, we can continue on and go to something rather exciting. And this is pointing at the potential of this, not the current state of it. Let me make that clear. This is a maybe for Terso. It's not set in stone yet, but maybe for Terso. So what do we have here? We do have a starting grid that you can set up. Let me just briefly change the surface spline so that it actually makes sense with what we are seeing. So there is the start finish. Alright, now the track surface here is actually aligned with the visuals that are layered behind. And if we go forwards again, now this will make sense. These are your starting positions. Let's say we have for this track 24. We have more than that for the track, but there are not as many pit stops, so we'll be a little tight in there. So spacing, or rather first, where does it start? Well, that is the front of the car for the first one. You can determine the stagger, and you can determine the width here, and of course the spacing. And if we have something like this, we can go further there. That is about right, 7 meters 50. And you see they all nicely align, so as long as you have made the artwork correct in the background and consistent, you will be able to align these, no problem. Also, you can set your split times along the track. Unfortunately, currently a bug in this version is that it doesn't show up where these are in the viewport, so I can't show you. But more excitingly is that we can place the pit lane spline, enter and exit. And, well, it's certainly not there. Let's switch to a different mode where the start-finish line is in the center of this one. And now we can pull the entrance to maybe there, effectively, and the exit is over there. Okay, so what does that one do? Well, we can now make a pit lane spline. And as you've guessed, that means we do have pit stops? Well, that is one of those maybe, hopefully things. And I can still move that one like that. So now they are going to drive off there and get into the pits. Now I've prepared the pit line spline, and that allows me, there's still icons missing, allows me to define the pit stops, or the pit slots. How do you call them? The spots where they are parking for the pit stops, just the same way as for the start finish. And they're always like high precision modes, like if you hold down control you can adjust that more finely. That's the same for the start grid that goes down to centimeter accuracy. And here we can determine how far away they are from the ideal line or ideal pit line. And their spacing as well, how many you have, and let's put in, I don't know how many there were, I think 27 or something. But yes, so you can all place them nicely. And yeah, that's basically that. So it's one of our goals to potentially have the ability, of course, why would you need pit stops unless, and starting grids, unless there's racing? Curious, isn't it? Of course, we also can't neglect the speed limitations of the pit lane. So maybe start there and exit. Yeah, maybe you are allowed to accelerate from there. And that's 80 kilometers an hour. And that's cool. I would want to point out here how powerful this tool is, considering what track sim stuff we are going to make. This will allow you to take whatever track, real or fictional, make it your own, optimize the splines for it, and have realistic interactions with it, with the cars that you also have designed yourself, and potentially even racing. But this isn't all, of course. There are some more things that we can set for the track, and that is camber, elevation, and roughness, surface, basically. So if we take a look here, let's do the simplest one first, roughness. Let's say our old forest track is kind of fucked. So it's not looking great there, mate. Now you see here that's getting like real bad and it's all over the place. That's maybe a section that is still a little better, but then where it's going steep uphill, you can always add additional points, sub-points to the spline. And that won't affect anything else, but just what you're currently working on here. So if I, for instance, want to add a sub-point here, can pull that up and you see it is reacting to that nicely, can put another point in there. It's just that sector that is bad, and then you're back to just being medium awful. And then it goes to the new track like this. That is a good point to stop it, but we want it to be bad right to the end. So we can check where this is by deselecting the nodes and just say like, okay, it's bad up to there. And whoop, there you go. So now the track calculations will consider this up to that point. The track is of that quality. Elevation works pretty much in the same way as the roughness editing, although you do have some more concrete data there for what this is about. So let's focus again on our little section here through the forest, which is my favorite, as I pointed out in the video before. So we're coming a little bit from a higher point here in the corner, and that previous bend there, this one. As you can see, when I hover over this, then I see where that is exactly. And we're coming down to that place, hit a bit of a low point there, and then from there it kicks off. You always see the slopes here indicated. We do want to be up there at, as I mentioned, about 80 meters higher. So something like this. All right, let's make that happen. We can zoom in a little, and now make the rough profile first, and then, of course, that would be rather steep. Oh, it's just a 45 percent descent there. That's perfectly adequate, of course. No, the cars and automation won't be able to jump. That's what you have BeamNG for, after all. You don't need that. Oh, by the way, a little tidbit nugget here. This is a derelict part of the track that was built in the early 1900s, like around, actually 1900, like 1905 to 1910. And as you see, it has been disused. It's no longer in use. And this part of the track here, the old forest track, should not be in use anymore, but it is still being used by enthusiasts. So here we can add sub-points as well. And where is the famous slope, Killer Up? Where's the famous slope? Well, we start off a little here, and then we hit a ramp. And that ramp is pretty much right there. So you always get some decent visual feedback for what is going on the track. And let's do the last thing that you can set. Of course, that is camber. Let's head over here, and now we can go, for instance, for this corner over here, and that's the very first one. You see the corner radii down in this one, roughly represented, and the direction. So what you could do, for instance, is add a point in the middle of the corner right there, and you see the little arrows helping you decide, like, what is the correct direction? Is this the correct direction? No, your car will end up in the gravel pit. So no, you want to pull it so that it's to the inside of the corner. You see how many degrees there are, and you can make the profile more complex if you wish. Yeah, basically however you want to do it. Once you have done the very first one, you can clone it to make different variations of it. You will be able to select, or you are in this version also, of the editor, able to select different variation sprites, and what the editor does is to compare them to the master sprite. It then takes a look at the variation sprite and the master sprite and decides what parts are actually different, and then only saves the differences so that it doesn't become massive, because 8K textures are not small. Just like this little dev update is not little, I guess. Anyway, I think though that this is pretty much showing you what is going on. We do have the clone of the track now here, which we can just continue editing and then changing it up. Make a different layout, even have different Pitlane entrance and stuff. They are all working as separate tracks, which you then can select from your test track menu in automation. Did I say I was done? I think so, at least for the editor. Let's head back to automation. What remains to be talked about is the outlook. As I've already mentioned, what our goals are for the Rilma update are that we have the standalone track editor available to you, as well as a pretty much base, bare-bones, fundamental version of the new track sim, which utilizes the definitions from the new track editor. That means that all our tracks that we have, and we are going to basically redo the automation track lines, which currently suck, use the 8K texture that we have for it, and do the same for the Ellisbury version, and make that more drivable, and basically give you that as the baseline new test track. You probably will see much better car behavior just because the ideal lines on the track are so much more well defined. As you've just seen from my editing of the track, you can go how detailed you want, really. But if we look ahead a whole year, the Terso update, maybe there are updates in between with like stuff that we couldn't quite finish off or something, or main features that are nicely compartmentalized, but let's call it the Terso main big update. Everything is done within the supercharger suite, right? What is the outlook for racing in that? Well, our ultimate goal is to bring you a version of multiplayer that is about racing. And a few of you might have heard about that little thing back in the day that Martin was working on privately, as well as for us, more or less. Well, not really for us, but he was using the automation calculations to do the BRC, the Bavarian Racing Challenge. Oh yes. It was community events where you designed a car and you were racing on the track. That was a lot of fun. And it was really clumsy. Like mega clumsy, because there was so much work involved in getting all those cars on the track and then simulating them and getting them all in line. It was crazy. Imagine a multiplayer mode where you are given a set of limitations for your car. For instance, it needs to appeal to the city budget demographic. And then you are going to do a race version of that right afterwards and actually put it on the track and have to race it against other players. Of course, you are not doing the driving, but you would have a driver. And there would be driver errors, depending on how much drivability versus sportiness you have, and all that good stuff. Like all your design choices matter. That is the ultimate goal with this, or like our dreamy target. If we are completely going to reach that is still out there and remains to be seen. But I thought that now with the track editor falling into your lap in, let's say, within the next 2 months or so, that would mean that you are very curious about why you can in the track editor define pit stops and a starting grid that makes absolutely no sense otherwise. So our goal would be to have multiplayer with racing attached to it. You build a car with a time limit, and then you have to put it on the track and race it against your competitors. Of course, we have plenty more ideas of where that could go in the future, in the far future, and in the not so far future. But I'll leave it at this for now, and leave your imagination to fill in some of the gaps. I hope you enjoyed, and I shall see you guys next time.